Yes, Shadowwork is actually dangerous. You are dismantling your entire personality structure, and that is not something that you should do lightly. You are playing with fire when you do this shit, so let's talk about it. What up, everybody? Welcome back to Operation Moksha. As always, I'm your host, Chris Roscoe, and today we're gonna be talking about the dangers of shadow integration. Let's just all acknowledge that I'm not a fucking doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not anything other than some guy who lost his shit a couple times, nursed himself back to health, and started teaching other people what he did. So I can't give you clinical advice. I can't give you anything other than my own personal opinion. So please take this with a big ass grain of salt. If there are other people that you consider to be greater authorities on this, listen to them, because like I said, I'm just some fucking guy. That being said, there are some things you need to look out for, because literally you are picking apart your personality structure. And that is not something that we're used to doing as people. And while we still have to pay the bills, and while we still have to like take care of kids and have relationships and all kinds of other shit, it's a crazy thing to do. And it can be really disorienting, it can be really scary. And if you're the kind of person that really clings to control, then it can be even more scary and disorienting for you. Because one of the things that happens is, especially if you're dismantling an identity or something, is you're gonna go into this kind of existential no man's land where you don't really know who you are anymore. You don't know what to do because your previous identity, which was your frame and your focal point for your whole reality, is just not there anymore. Like you channeled all the emotion that used to hold you up and used to hold up your identity, and so it's gone now. And it hasn't been replaced with anything new. So you're just kind of sitting there in this no man's land. And like I've made memes about it because it's funny and most people survive it and it's not that big of a deal. However, it can be really scary, it can be really disorienting if you are the type of person that really craves control, because it'll make you feel like you're out of control. And if you don't know how to handle that experience, that can have you spiral and that can bring you to some really negative states. Now, like I said, I've never experienced anyone do that because when they do this, they have me there to make sure that they know what to look at. So if you don't have a mentor or you don't have anybody that can kind of watch out and make sure that you're doing this correctly, then you really need to be fucking careful. I taught myself, but I taught myself when I was in such a low point in my life that I had nothing to lose. I couldn't go crazier. I couldn't want to end my life more than I already did. I had nowhere else to go but up. So I didn't care. I put all of my fucking money on this thing and it ended up working out. However, in the research that I've done, I found that there were some things that were unique to my experience that not a lot of other people have, and that is really necessary. I had a strong sense of identity when I was doing this. I knew who I was. I've known who I was since I was a little kid, and that has not really changed much. I've known very strongly who the fuck I am, what I stand for, what kind of life I want to create, and ultimately the kind of man I want to become ever since I was a little kid. And there's a lot of people that don't have that. So no matter how many times I got pulled around or went into a dark, scary hole, I had this fire inside of me that was like, no, like I know where I want to go, I know who I want to be, and I'm gonna fucking get there. And so without that, which is like I was watching this video that my friend sent me yesterday about how important like a strong ego is when you're gonna start digging around in the unconscious. And a lot of people don't like the ego, but the ego is partially what helps ground you into reality. So if you're gonna start picking apart your personality, you need to be grounded in reality. This is another one of these things that Carl Jung, it was a really big thing for him, is he was able to stay sane for the most part because he was a doctor, he was a clinical psychologist, he had a family, he had things in the real world that anchored him into reality. I didn't have that, but I did have a really strong sense of identity. I had a strong ego. I had a strong sense of who the fuck I was and where I wanted to go and what I was attempting to accomplish and what I wanted to get out of it. A lot of people don't have that. And so when you start digging around in these things and you don't have a strong internal compass to help you try and find your way in the dark, you can just stay in the dark. And if you end up staying in the dark without a way of knowing how to get out, you can fall into despair. You can get really depressed and not know how to get out. You can create intense existential anxiety, and you can feel as though you've kind of fucked yourself and made your situation a whole lot worse than it would have been if you never did this practice in the first place. So you have to be really careful when you do this on your own, especially if you don't have a strong ego, if you don't have a strong sense of identity, if you don't have a strong vision for who you really want to become that's going to anchor you into the physical world and make sure that you still want to be here. It's easy to get lost. As you get lost, there are so many ways for that to go wrong. I've experienced intense despair, that I've fallen into holes that I would never get out of, and it was partially my fire that got me out of it. It was partially my understanding of what I was even doing that allowed me to embrace the despair as a distinct part and be like, oh, okay, cool. Like, who's the despair now? And like, blah, 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 blah. And so you have to be willing to look at everything that comes up as a part that can be dialogued with and that can be integrated as. And there's also lots of parts that may come up and have different opinions that are all vying for your attention at the same time. And you need to know how to listen to that so that the anxiety and trying to listen to all these voices doesn't fucking drive you crazy. But I've had experiences where I've had so many different parts of my personality yelling so many intense things that it feels like I'm gonna fucking go crazy. Now I don't, because I know how to express those things. I know how to release the pressure in my own mind and in my body. And then once I do, all those thoughts that are like, this is intense, they all calm down. And I was like, oh, you guys were just really afraid of this thing, which is why you were being so loud. And you can always get to something like that. However, I'm gonna say this a million times, if you don't know what you're doing, and if you don't have anyone in your life who knows how to guide you there, and if you don't have a strong fire in your heart and a strong sense of identity and something to keep you grounded in reality, I'm gonna say this a lot, you can get lost and you really don't want to. One of the other dangers is the fact that this practice inherently and by definition is looking at all the parts of your personality that you told yourself to never look at again. All your biggest fears, all your deepest pains and traumas, any part of you that feels truly helpless and powerless. Maybe you hate the world. Maybe there's some violence in you that you don't know how to deal with. There's so many different things that can be unlocked, and you don't necessarily know what that's gonna be when you start doing this. Like, I have been surprised. I've been like, oh, this seems like a little thing. Like, let me let this part talk. And then as soon as it starts talking, it was a avalanche of emotion. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that was in there. I didn't know that was gonna happen. And it can make me feel a little destabilized for upwards to a week. Like, I know how to handle feeling destabilized. I know how to continue moving forward and stay grounded even though I feel destabilized, but you might not. That might be really disorienting for you. When you have a huge wave of emotion, it might scare you. You might collapse under it. You might not know what to do with it. It might trigger traumatic memories. It might trigger so many things that you simply don't know how to process and hold and put into context. Luckily, there are safeguards in your mind to stop you from being able to do this. Like, your mind won't really let you see things that you're not ready for. However, ready is a relative term, because you might be ready to see something and that you could potentially process it if you fucking knew how to, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you know how to. Ready just means that, like, this part of you is now ready and willing to be seen, and it's ready and willing to be looked at, and you have at least somewhat the capacity to be able to allow it to do that to a certain degree. Now, you still might get flooded with more emotion than you know what to deal with. That could trigger panic, that could trigger paranoia, that could trigger suicidal ideation, that could trigger deep depression. And if you don't see that coming, and if you don't know what to do about that or how to handle all that shit, then it could be disorienting, it could be dysregulating, it could give you into some really scary episodes, and it could be challenging to figure out how to get yourself back out of that, if you know how to get yourself back out of that at all. And this gets compounded even further if you're the type of person who enjoys psychedelics. There is a quote from Carl Jung where he says, beware of unearned wisdom. And he's specifically talking about trying to gain wisdom through psychedelics. This is something that I did a lot when I was younger, and I do not recommend it at all. This is not the way to gain wisdom. This is absolutely not the way to gain wisdom. What this is the way to do is to learn a whole bunch of shit that you don't know how to put into context. And if you are like I was, and you're not really that well put together at the time, and you're learning all the secrets of the universe, and you're having all this incredible information downloaded into your brain, but you barely know how to function, that shit is not compatible with your current worldview. It is not compatible with your emotional capacity. It is not compatible with your skill level to integrate it. It is not compatible with anything about your reality. So you could potentially have these mind-blowing realizations that make perfect sense to you when you're on acid or ayahuasca or whatever, but then you come back into the real world and it's just like, I don't know what to do with that. I've seen more than I know how to deal with. Holy f***. This is more than I can handle. And luckily, I took the time to process my emotions and deal with all of it. And so now all those things that I saw that I couldn't handle, now I can handle. Now I can deal with. But I'm 36 now, and that happened when I was 22. That whole 10-year period from 22 to 32, I would not wish that on anyone. It's barely even worth it to say that I got here now, because I could have been fine, I could have been doing something else and just had 10 more years of my life that I could have enjoyed. Now, we've talked about some of the dangers, we've talked about some of the things that can go wrong. Now, how do we do this in a healthy way? The first thing that I always recommend, where if you look on my courses or if you ever taught me or if I've ever coached you or anything like that, the first thing I always talk about when it comes to shadow integration is creating a meaningful vision for your life. Now, this isn't just because you need to know where you're going. This isn't an arbitrary thing that I made up out of nowhere. The vision is important because it's what anchors you to reality. And if you're gonna start with your relationship to reality, you need a pretty strong anchor to keep you here. If you're gonna start destabilizing your personality, you have to know what's gonna take its place. Because when you start dismantling these things and you start expressing all of these emotions and shit, what happens is you create an existential void inside of yourself. There's that phrase, nature abhors a vacuum. And what that means is that if there's a void or a vacuum, it will get filled. And it can either be filled by the beliefs and visions and imaginings of your choosing, or it can be filled by whatever just happens to show up. And if you dysregulate yourself without a strong vision to keep you grounded, that dysregulation can create a lot of fear and panic and anxiety and all kinds of other experiences. And then in which case that void that's left over will get filled by fear and anxiety and despair and blah, 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 blah. And you'll be worse off than you were before. So instead, what I recommend is having that vision that is grounded in reality. You're like, no, this is actually who I want to be, or at least the best that I can imagine right now. This is actually the life I want to live. This is worth committing to for me. This is worth anchoring into, so that when I start dysregulating my personality and dismantling these key elements of my worldview, vacuum is created, and it's filled by the things of my choosing. Therefore, as I dysregulate and I replace it, I become more grounded into my values and into my vision and into my desires and my identity of choice, rather than becoming more grounded into despair and fear and existential terror and all kinds of bullshit. So when I say to create the vision, like, that's not an arbitrary thing. I'm saying that because it keeps you grounded. And also, like I said before, you can stir up more emotion than you were expecting. And if you have a strong vision, it can remind you to keep going. Because a lot of us experience hopelessness and we don't know it. Like, all the things that you don't pursue, even though you want to, chances are some part of you says it's hopeless. Otherwise, you'd at least try. Like, most people don't try because they think something is hopeless. And so many more of us experience hopelessness than we're aware of. And so a lot of times when I coach people, they'll have their first experience of, holy f***, this actually feels truly hopeless. I feel genuinely powerless. That is one of the most challenging experiences that myself or my clients ever experience. But when you have a strong vision for your life that you actually want to work towards, it's like, okay, I want that. It's worth it to face these things because I want that. I want to become this person. I want to stay anchored in this reality. Cool. It's worth it for me to feel these really terrifying emotions if it means I get to cross this bridge and become this person on the other side and get to live this vision and all these sorts of things. Because emotions are fucking scary. There's a reason we don't want to face them. There's a reason our minds have been devoted to keeping them down so we never have to face them. They're terrifying. Who knows what the fuck you've gone through? I experienced the death of my father when I was 6 years old. So having to deal with all those emotions is not a very pleasant experience. Having to deal with the hopelessness and powerlessness and rage and hatred and everything that comes along with that experience of having it so young was not pleasant. It was not a pleasant thing. And if I wasn't doing that in service of something bigger, I might have quit, I might have stopped, I might have just like gone down some other weird ass rabbit hole and dug myself into a hole. But knowing that there was something on the other side of it for me was extremely helpful and extremely potent. So it not only gives you like an anchor into reality, but it gives you something to remember, like, oh yeah, I did this for a reason. I did this so I can become someone new. And everything that is coming up for me is simply something that I have to face, continue processing, and integrate so that I can become that person. I know that if I just deal with this, the only thing that will be left is more connection between me and the person that I want to be. So the vision is much more essential than just like having a pleasurable thing to look at. And the identity is the same thing. The identity, when you start dismantling your identity, it creates that void, the vacuum, and you're like, okay, I'm not this person anymore. And then when you're in that existential no man's land, you get to remember, oh yeah, I stepped in here because I wanted to get away from that thing and become this thing. And your vision of the new identity and the person that you want to be starts to become like a rope that you get to pull on to bring you towards the new reality. It's like you're walking around in a dark room, but you've got this rope that you can pull that you're like, okay, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's happening, but I've at least got my vision. I know what kind of person I want to become. So let's just keep walking in that direction. And it gives you something to orient yourself around when you have destabilized everything that allows you to orient yourself. Now, another thing that I teach people is to honor their emotional capacity and their pacing. Especially if you're a perfectionist, and especially if you're like super ambitious, people that are constantly go, 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 and don't know how to chill, that attitude is not going to serve you very well when it comes to shadow integration. You have to respect your own pace, right? Because your mind, like I said before, your mind has safeguards. And so if you're processing an emotion, your mind will be like, okay, that's enough. And it'll either wipe you, make you forget what you were doing, shut you down, or find some other way to get you to stop. But if you're like a hardcore type A personality where you can't allow yourself to stop because it's like, if I stop, I'm a failure and I got to do things all the time. I got to move forward. Otherwise I suck as a person. Then what you're going to do is that's going to make you want to push through your own safeguards of your mind. And your mind won't let you. The safeguards are stronger. But either way, you can still really screw yourself. You can burn yourself out. You can make it so that these parts are feeling less safe than they were before, which will put them against you and possibly have you deal with even more emotion. And I've seen people just like pick at themselves and make things so much worse. And I have to be like, yo, fucking chill, bro. Like that's not how you do this, because this is a relationship building. You really have to look at this as building a relationship with yourself. It's not just another test to pass. It's not just another way to prove yourself that you're strong and capable and can do things faster than everybody else. This is a relationship, and a relationship builds at the pace that it builds, and that's just it. Trust builds at the pace that it builds. All these things just build at their own natural pace, and there's nothing you can do about it. Same the way when you build a relationship with your own unconscious. It's only going to show you what it's going to show you at any given moment. You have to respect that. You're only going to be able to process however much emotion you're going to be able to process, and you have to respect that. And trying to move beyond that is going to make your symptoms worse. And if you perpetually try to move beyond your own capacity, I don't know how far that goes, but you can dig yourself in some pretty dark holes, so I don't fucking recommend it. Which again is another good reason to have somebody in your team, somebody on your side who knows what they're doing. Even if it's just me, even if you just DM me your questions so that I can write a piece of content on it. Like I wouldn't rely solely on that because I'm not there with you and I don't know the details, but you need to have somebody on your side that somewhat understands what's going on, that can kind of give you an idea of like, okay, dude, like you haven't been yourself, like what's going on, like how do we reorient? And if you don't trust that you're the kind of person that could weather these storms, that you have the strong enough identity, the strong enough ego, strong enough connection to reality, like maybe just build those things first. You really do need to be pretty grounded if you're going to try and do this without dysregulating yourself. Because the fact of the matter is you will dysregulate yourself. I dysregulate myself all the time. I'm just so comfortable with it that it doesn't stop me anymore. Like I said before, like I've never seen this hurt anybody. I've been teaching this publicly for 10 years. However, there are some dangers that I myself have noticed, and there are some ways that you can make your symptoms far worse. And so I did want to take some time to talk about those and give you some insights into how you can do this in a healthy way. Make sure that you're grounded. Make sure that you're oriented towards a goal. Make sure that you have people in your life that can watch your back. Make sure that you have somebody who at least kind of knows what the fuck is going on. And if you don't have any of that, then maybe develop that before you start really digging into this practice on your own. However, if you do have more serious things going on, like make sure you have people in your team, make sure that you have some kind of therapist, coach, guide, somebody who truly knows what they're doing and can lead you through some of these more severe things. However, if it's a very severe thing, I don't even know that I'd recommend shadow integration because I don't know how it reacts to those types of things. So you really want to gauge the level of severity that you're working with and make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Make sure that you're being responsible. Make sure that you're not playing with more fire than you know how to put out if it starts getting places. Just know yourself. Know how deep you are into things, what kind of support structures you need and all that sort of stuff, because you are dysregulating your personality and there are some inherent dangers that go along with that. And one last thing to throw in there is like before you're gonna start dysregulating your personality and doing all this shit, just do the basic checklist real quick. When's the last time you drank some water? When's the last time you ate a decent meal? When's the last time you have you been sleeping well? When's the last time you exercised, went on a walk, hung out with friends, played with a puppy? All kinds of things that will actually regulate your mood, get sunshine, all those types of things will help regulate your nervous system on their own. So if you're not doing those things, just do those things first and then maybe try doing shadow integration if that doesn't help. But like I said, know yourself, know how deep in whatever patterns you are, take the appropriate measures, know yourself, know how deep you are in whatever symptoms or experiences that you're having, take the appropriate precautions, make sure you have the right people in your life, proceed with caution, and if it starts to get crazy, just stop. Take care of yourself, go on a walk, do whatever you need to do, and if you are trying this practice and it keeps getting out of hand, and stop. Get yourself grounded, find some other practices that will help you get grounded and feel a little bit more comfortable with yourself, and then possibly revisit it after you feel a little bit more stable. But this is a really complex concept. There's a million things I could have talked about. There's a million things you could potentially be curious about. So if you have any questions or concerns or anything else you want to add to this at all, comment, DM me, whatever you want, let me know. And if you think this could help anybody, please share with them. Please like the video. Let me know that you guys are into this sort of shit. And also, honestly, just help me grow. I want to get this out to as many people as I possibly can. I want this work to impact as many people as I possibly can. I want shadow integration to change the world. So the more people we get this to, the better. So thank you. I love you. I'll see you next time.